All right, President Trump is sending a message to Iran and their back proxies by teaming up with Saudi Arabia to strike militia groups over in Iraq after a string of attacks on American forces. But who are these groups? Let me give you an overview. First off, obviously, this is where the money comes from. This is the area in which they're located. You got about 10 Shiite groups that really came into prominence after we invaded, yes, but mostly after we pulled out during the Obama administration and left the void. In come these Iranian militias to actually to put down the push of ISIS, and they stayed. So about 10 groups, 50,000. Who are the biggest groups? Well, here's one of them, the Kataib Hezbollah, yes, affiliated with Hezbollah. They got the most rockets. They seem to, if anybody was to hit Jordan, you would think this group is the group to actually do it because they're the most armed up. Then you have this group with al-Haq, named after one of these guys. He was also arrested. He was jailed. He was let out. He forms a group. And this al-Khazali is trying to become part of the political process and soften his image, but being part of a militia is not helpful. We do now have an Iraqi leader that wants to be affiliated with us and keep these guys under control. The question is, are they going to have the armaments and the army to do exactly that? Because Iran backs them. Another reason why you want to diminish Iran's power, that's when these guys stop being funded. And then, of course, Hezbollah stops being funded and Hamas gets diminished. They become weaker and hopefully less effective. And the Badr Organization, named after an Ayatollah, was killed during Saddam's reign. This group was once affiliated with al-Sadr. They are somebody that's somewhat formidable. So having said all that, and knowing that they had everything to do with Jordan and our base being rocketed in Jordan, where do we go from here? Let's bring in former CENTCOM Director of Intelligence, Lieutenant General Karen Gibson joins us now. Lieutenant General, we hit last night. We hit a series of targets, but there's no word yet on how effective these hits have been or how effective those 14 days of hits were.
That's right. When I look at what an adversary might do, the options that are available, I look at two things. One, what is their desire, their intent, their stated will, what they seek to accomplish, and then what is their capability to do that. And when you think back to Iran's current stated will and intent, which is to continue to control the Strait of Hormuz, to enable some kind of mechanism where they sustain that control, and they are doing that through these drone and missile strikes against commercial shipping. Our many strikes have not eliminated that capacity, and frankly, although we've degraded it significantly, it's been tactically significant, truly eliminating it totally is darn near impossible. It's an incredibly high bar. I think that's what Admiral Cooper was saying. And then the second side, you know, what is their desired will and intent? These strikes that CENTCOM has conducted very proficiently, there's no evidence that they've done anything to move the needle on the IRGC and the Iranian Islamic Republic's desire to control the strait. So both capability and intent still not entirely changed.
And let's take a look at the map, the Strait of Hormuz and the Bab el-Mandab Strait, which is basically the Red Sea. The Houthis are creating havoc there, which has forced us to use the Suez Canal, which I understand is not really able to take the huge tankers. And then the Strait of Hormuz, people are making pipelines rapidly to go around it. But I hear the frustration in your voice. But evidently, Admiral Cooper does have a plan to do maximum damage on the people closing these straits, and that's the IRGC. With the IDF, are you convinced that we can make the impression to truly cut their legs out substantially if we could factor in the IDF and who knows what Gulf states be willing to take action too, without going with ground troops?
Well, yeah, no, not necessarily. I mean, I think certainly this is probably what we will try, and we will, again, degrade the IRGC. But earlier in the program, you talked about the split between the political entity, more moderates who might be willing to reach some kind of accommodation, and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps who are not. Let's be clear. It's the security state that is actually running Iran right now. Without the IRGC, the political arm would be nothing. Let's remember, some 85, 90% 90% of Iranians want a change to the government. Without the security state to prop them up, the political entity would not exist. And anyone who doubts the commitment of the IRGC to the survival of the state as it is need only look back to January, when they willingly gunned down tens of thousands of their own citizens on, camera for the world to see. That's how committed they are. So it will take a lot to convince or change the minds of the men leading Iran, who see this as an existential fight for the survival of their state.
Right. I just don't think it's worth talking to anybody but the IRGC. There's no sense of talking to the foreign minister, the prime minister, the president. They have no power. And I don't care. I don't believe there are any good guys we should be talking to. We just got to talk to the guys with the guns, who, by the way, keep hanging those protesters. They hung 2 more yesterday. Thanks so much, Lieutenant General. We'll look forward to seeing what Admiral Cooper comes up with, and hopefully he gets in the room to pitch the president directly and doesn't have to go through somebody else, because that's been the problem in the past. Appreciate it.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube, and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.